What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Conflicts of Interest. This is episode 53, and I'm the host, Kyle Anzalone. Got a lot of good news to cover in today's show, especially about Assange's extradition. So, I'll get into all that. Just want to remind people to share the show. You find it online on YouTube, the Conflicts of Interest channel there. Subscribe, share the show, like it if you're watching the video there. All that stuff helps to get the show out to new people. And like I say, got some good news stuff to talk about today and some important stuff to talk about. You can also find the show at the Libertarian Institute, where I'm the news editor and publish all my work. So check out the libertarianinstitute.org as well. And then you could also subscribe to the show on the podcast feeds. It's also on the Libertarian Institute, all podcast feed. And there you would get my show, Scott Horton's show, Free Man Beyond the Wall, Don't Tread on Anyone, and several other good shows. So let's get into the Assange news. And that is the judge in Assange's extradition hearing in the UK. This wasn't like a US jury trial. They were basically just trying to convince this one judge the whole time. Vanessa Barrister is her name. And from what we have seen and heard from her in the trial, it seemed like she was going to rule against Assange. There were a lot of motions that were just like pretty simple things, like Assange was like kept in this bulletproof box in the back of the court, and he like couldn't like talk with his counsel. He often couldn't hear what was going on at the trial. And even the prosecution, those trying to get Assange extradited, were okay with him sitting with his counsel, and the judge denied it anyways. And so there was that. There were some personal attacks that she levied against Assange, just seeming not to like him very much personally. That made it seem an awful lot like if this lady was just going to get to make a decision, her decision would be against Assange. And so I think that she ends up deciding not to grant the extradition request was pretty surprising today. This whole Assange extradition has been going on really for a couple of years now, but the actual hearing, I guess, for the about past 6 months that we've had important procedural motions happen. Who would get to testify, who wouldn't, how long the testimony would be. There were a lot of people that were slated to testify who didn't get a chance to. Maybe they only submitted their testimony in writing, stuff like that. The cross-examination time was limited. All these things were came up. There was overall, I think, about 4 weeks or 3 weeks worth of actual what you would think, people presenting evidence and talking about this point, that point, arguing over this, that, and the other. Thankfully, we know what is happening in this extradition, which has been pretty shut down. There hasn't been a whole lot of mainstream media coverage of it, and there was only a limited number of people who were even able to kind of witness and view the trial. There were a couple ways to do this. I guess there were a limited number of seats available at the court that this was happening at, although not in the actual room most of the time, it sounded like, but like in an auxiliary room there was like 5 to 10 people in there, which often included Craig Murray, who did a great job writing up like daily just rundowns of what was going on in the Assange trial. Most of those were published on his blog, Consortium News, and antiwar.com, which were three outlets that did a great job of covering this. And then there were also people who were able to view this through like a video feed remotely. And Kevin Gunstola is the journalist that, from my understanding, that really made this possible. He hired a lawyer and got this access, and then other people were able to apply to it. So thankfully, Kevin was also writing up those daily like breakdowns and analysis of what was going on, and has continued to do so. His Twitter feed has been invaluable in following what was going on in this extradition. So for those of you watching the video feed, what I have up here is his feed of what was going on today as Judge Barrister announced her decision. And so I'll kind of just break that down. You could even see within this feed that he doesn't seem to quite expect the results that we get. And so the first tweet he sends out is, "Judge finds Assange is not protected by U.S., UK, and Extradition Act of 2003, which does not protect against prosecution of political offenses, is what governs." And so what he's saying there is that there was an argument within the extradition that if it was political, he couldn't be extradited to the U.S. by the way the U.S.-UK treaty works, but she comes that you know that's not the case, and that he committed crimes, I guess, that were worthy of extradition or something like that. She says that Assange's alleged activities went beyond mere encouragement of a journalist and outlines alleged password cracking conspiracies. This is important, where she must either not understand the argument that was being made by the Assange team or really believes in heavy restrictions of journalism and free speech, because what they're talking about with this password cracking conspiracy, it's alleged that Assange offered to or did help Chelsea Manning use a password not to give Chelsea Manning access to any documents that she already didn't have access to, but rather to allow her to have more anonymity. And so this is far more similar to a journalist providing a source with ideas on how, maybe to take certain um, names or tags off of documents, different things like that, so that people don't know exactly who you are, right? Allowing their source a little bit of anonymity, which I think a lot of journalists, especially investigative journalists, would say no, that's all good and definitely a part of um, journalism. And so I'm not sure what it is. My guess is that this lady is probably willing to just limit free speech about that much. Um, so Judge Bannister just apparently, according to Gustola, repeated the general allegations added in the superseding indictment. This is kind of important because the superseding indictment was sprung on the defense attorneys just weeks before the trial, before the extradition trial started. And the defense team was hoping to get a little bit of an extension then, even though it would mean Assange spending more time in jail, just so they could more adequately prepare for this. It would be like if you're preparing somebody for a trial for tax evasion or something like that, and then 2 days before that trial starts, they add on all these charges for assault and they're separate incidents and everything. Your legal team then needs to prepare for those charges separately. The Assange team wasn't granted that in this trial, and so she goes along with all those superseding indictment issues, apparently, even though there's a lot of issues with them, and I've talked about that on other shows. I'm not going to get into all that today. Let's see. The next point that she makes is saying that Assange was trying to obtain classified information by hacking, and that goes outside of the role of investigative journalism. It's not necessarily on barrister to decide what is and isn't journalism, although that is what she's doing here. But there's no evidence that like Assange was like a guy who hacked into the Pentagon and then released this information through WikiLeaks. Rather, he was somebody who received information. She goes on to say that free speech does not provide unfettered discretion by Mr. Assange to decide what he's going to publish. And no, that is what free speech is. It allows you to say or publish what you want to say or publish. People will say there's some limitations on this if you're like inciting people to violence. And so if, you can make the argument here where if you're like in 1940s Germany or something like that, and you're pointing to some guy and yelling Jew, Jew, Jew or something like that's you're inciting people to harm him, and so that's like not free speech. Where publishing information that the government want to keep secret because it was embarrassing and exposed their war crimes, it is in no way falls into any of these categories where you could say, well, it's doing this or anything else. Now, then she gets into this interesting part of the story, where in 2010, part of those leaks that came out, the State Department cables and everything like that. I guess actually this is about a year later in 2011 or so. As they're getting ready to publish these documents, Luke Harding and other journalists who had access to the WikiLeaks documents as they were going through and vetting them and redacting them to make sure that they took out names of anybody who didn't deserve to be named in these documents, and that all these documents were accurate and everything like that. There was a journalist, Luke Harding, who felt pretty upset that Assange was taking so long and just wanted to get all these documents out right away. And so this journalist went and published a book with the encryption key code, which was like a long thing, and made it a chapter title in one of his books. And then another outlet went through and published an article saying that that was the encryption code to those documents. And so in response to that, WikiLeaks decided to just go ahead and publish all the documents unredacted. Since some people are going to have access to the unredacted documents, WikiLeaks wanted to just release them all unredacted, so everybody would have access to the same documents, and that includes the potential State Department sources, I believe in Afghanistan, that were named in these documents. Some people were worried about their safety. Would they be targeted by other people in their village or the Taliban for working with the Americans? Although the U.S. government was never able to prove anybody was harmed from these documents being leaked, Julian Assange did want to take great care. And if anybody should be on trial here, it would be Luke Harding, who actually went through and published the chapter title with that information. Of course, my main problem with how Luke Harding did it wasn't necessarily that he at least released all the unredacted documents. I mean, I think there's an argument to do that either way, but rather how, sneakily he did it. And, his wasn't a care about, the lives of the Afghan people like Assange's was. That's why he was going through to painstakingly redact these documents. Barrister rules that Assange was found to be in violation of the Official Secrets Act. This is the UK equivalent to the Espionage Act that says you can't publish secret documents. It's a terrible thing that the UK has this, but I suppose that, Assange being a hero is in violation of unjust laws. She says that prosecutors brought charges against Assange in good faith, and also asserts that insufficient evidence was the decision that made the U.S. not prosecute Assange over Obama. So I think the analysis on that second part about the insufficient evidence under Obama is to make this not political. One of the things that the Assange team, I think, argued importantly and correctly was that under Obama, they decided that they had the New York Times problem, which was that there was no way they could charge and prosecute Assange for anything that the New York Times doesn't also do all the time. And so that was a real issue for the Obama administration. And so the Trump administration, with all the same evidence, comes to then the conclusion to prosecute WikiLeaks. Say you can make the case, well, it's a political left versus right in the U.S. thing, and that's why Assange is being targeted. And so she says that wasn't the case, and that new evidence presented itself, although this is all from the 2010 State Department Afghan war logs, Iraq war logs, and Guantanamo files that WikiLeaks released. And in all those cases, there was already the very extensive Chelsea Manning trial where all of this was investigated. So I'm not sure where she gets this new evidence from. And then she said they brought the charges in good faith. And what a joke that this is. He went and he exposed the war crimes of this government and all the legal things that we are doing with the drone wars and stuff like that. And it ends up being him that gets prosecuted rather than the people committing the war crimes. It's hard to say that those people prosecuting Assange are bringing those charges in good faith. The next point made by Judge Barrister was on the UC Global and spying of Julian Assange in the Ecuadorian embassy. And so this is what I thought maybe would get this thrown out, because it's pretty clear that the company UC Global was contracted by the US intelligence agencies to spy on Assange while he was having privileged conversations with his attorneys and stuff within the Ecuadorian embassy. I mean, that seems like the kind of thing that would get a trial, thrown out. But she says that's not an issue because the U.S. government was engaged in a spying operation against Assange to collect information on him for other reasons, and uses this ridiculous CNN hit piece on Assange to make that point. This is why, journalism matters, and, writing these ridiculous pieces like CNN has attacking Assange over the past couple of years because they're a little bitter about the 2016 election, has real impact on journalism there. Anyways, I think those are the main points that she made leading up until the time that we get the announcement that she is deciding not to extradite Julian Assange. And this is the point where she says that she determines that Julian Assange is at a high risk of suicide and that there is a real risk he will be detained, subject to special administration measures in the U.S., and especially because the intelligence community is hostile to him, and extradition would be oppressive by reason of Assange's mental health. Gustola goes on to say the judge is saying that she is satisfied with the procedures described by the U.S. that would not prevent Assange from finding a way to commit suicide in a U.S. supermax prison. The judge and defense are discussing an application for bail. The U.S. government is going to immediately appeal. The judge rules against U.S. extradition of Julian Assange, contending extradition would be oppressive by reason of Assange's mental health. And so there it is. I mean, there's a whole bunch of terrible stuff that she said in there. A lot of things that are really against free speech and journalism. And, when the U.S. is the First Amendment, and I'm sure there's similar principles that they have in their pretty flexible constitution in the UK, that really says that the government, if I guess Assange was in better mental health state, then she wouldn't extradite him. That's kind of what it seems like, which is terrible. But at the same time, that Julian Assange will be potentially a free man in the coming days is the best news that we could have hoped for. I didn't want to be hopeless about the Assange situation. I was trying to be realistic and felt like there really wasn't much of a chance that this was going to be the outcome, in large part because of all the things that I wrote down, that they really do believe that Julian Assange committed criminal acts according to U.S. law, and that the U.S.-UK extradition treaty supports, I guess, those U.S. charges. So, yeah, I think that's all I have on Assange. I believe I saw that the U.S. will have 14 days to appeal and plans to do so immediately. And then Assange again will have a hearing on Wednesday. I'll probably talk about that on the Friday show, because I think it'll be Wednesday afternoon, on his bail conditions and if he'll get out on bail. And man, what I guess it'd be nice for this guy just to, live somewhere and be able to walk outside in his backyard, even if his he's on ankle monitor or something like that. I'm sure for him it'll be just an insane and great amount of freedom to enjoy. With that, again, I think that's all I have on Assange. I just want to take a quick second to thank the sponsor of the show before I get into the rest of the news I have for today. And the sponsor, of course, is Paloma Verde, where they sell great CBD products. I personally really like the soft gels that they sell and recommend people checking those out. Very easy. Just remember to take one in the morning. It helps you feel a little bit better throughout the day. They sell a lot of other great products like gummies and extracts that are a little bit pack a little bit more of a punch. Check out PalomaVerdeStore.com to see all their products. And then you could use the promo code PEACE for a discount when you check out. That's PEACE at checkout. And you'll get a discount at palomaverdestore.com. All right, let's get back into the news. All right, the next story I have here is bad to the bad news. And it's about Duncan Lemp, who was the young 21-year-old activist, libertarian leaning guy who was killed in, I believe, March of 2020, early March of 2020. And James Bovard is the man who's been doing great work making sure that we know what's going on in this case. So again, Duncan Lemp, 21 years old, and this article I got most of my details from here is at the American Conservative, titled "The Official Whitewashing of the Killing of Duncan Lemp." And so what happened was you had a no-knock raid in the middle of the morning on his house, again, March 12th. And they say now in their, they just released this review report on the killing that was released on New Year's Eve. So obviously they're trying to bury it. And they say the no-knock raid was violent because Lemp was anti-government, anti-police, owned body armor, and was a member of a militia, or like a militia-like group, the Three Percenters. This is absolutely absurd that this would justify a no-knock raid on his home. I mean, you have to at least have some evidence that this guy would do something violent, or I don't, like, you know, you're trying to flush drugs down the toilet or something like that, that you need these no-knock raid. I mean, that's why they claim to have them. In this case, it's just because of his beliefs, which is pretty disturbing because I share a lot of them with this guy. And I know a lot of other people in the libertarian movement do as well. And that's why, you know, they've taken particular notice to the Duncan Lemp murder here. And so the police have two people go to his window. Again, this is the middle of the night. They busted down, they pulled the blinds aside, and then they say that they warned Duncan Lemp to put down a rifle he was holding before shooting him 5 times. This is a big change from the police story in March, claiming that the police came through the front door and engaged Duncan Lemp, I guess, near his doorway, like his bedroom doorway. This was his parents' house, I believe, he lived in. And so I guess it's unclear really what happened, if he was holding a gun, what if a thought process he had, like, you know, if somebody breaks down your window in the middle of the night, I don't know why you assume it's the police. I mean, this seems a hell of a more lot like somebody trying to rob you or murder you is going to do. And so if Lemp was concerned and grabbed a gun, and the, you know, police are just shining a light through the window, you know, you have not only police breaking through your window, but you also, I'm sure, could hear them breaking down the front door as well, and not hearing necessarily police or anything like that, but just like hearing somebody break down the front door. And so, you know, who knows what it was. There's no body cameras at the because Maryland SWAT didn't require their SWAT teams to wear them if they didn't want to. And yeah, and so that's how they say that this is a good shoot on Duncan Lemp. They won't give the name of the police officer who did it. They convened a grand jury, but present very selective evidence. You know, in just so many ways, this reminds me of the Breonna Taylor incident, which I talked about in the last show, where they just dropped the charges against her, or not the charges, they just fired 2 police officers that were involved in her killing. But rather, whenever they had an opportunity to bring those officers with criminal charges, they didn't do so. So, yep, that's, I guess, probably the end of any hope that Duncan Lemp is going to get any kind of justice within our, you know, official justice system. Maybe we'll at least get the name of the officer, and that could be publicized, hopefully force that guy out of a job, and made sure he never, has the authority to walk around, kick people's windows in, and kill them again. The next article is some good news from Yahoo News, and it's titled Illinois expunges nearly 500,000 cannabis arrest records. So this is great news. These cannabis arrest records follow people around for a long time, could hurt them from getting jobs. Stuff like, you Google it on somebody, a prospective tenant and stuff like that looks really bad and hurts them in a lot of different ways. And so it's great to see, states not only starting to legalize cannabis and marijuana at greater rates and, making this not a criminal issue. Now, you could have whatever feelings you want to have on marijuana as long as you if you want to talk to people about not using it, that's great. You can't want to throw them in jail for using it. So now pot is legal in the state, and it expunged a whole bunch of cannabis arrest records. Is a step in the right direction for the state of Illinois. It's interesting. A lot of the legal states are kind of more on the coast. This is right in the center of the country. Of course, there is Michigan, but it seems to be something that's really starting to spread in the United States. And hopefully, as the government concedes, I guess, in the war on marijuana, people will understand that the war on other drugs will play out in a lot of the same ways, and that we'll end up actually reaping benefits from ending the war on drugs, not having greater and more problematic drug use. And that story is from Dave DeCamp at antiwar.com. Senate joins House to override Trump's NDAA veto. Now, this story, there's a couple layers to it in nuance, like at pretty much everything we talk about on this show. On Friday, the Senate voted to override President Trump's veto of the 2021 National Defense Authorization Act. In an 18-13 vote, the Senate easily secured the necessary two-thirds majority needed to override. The House already voted to override the veto 322 to 87. The vote marks the first time Congress rebutes one of Trump's vetoes with an override. Trump hasn't had that many vetoes, but this is one of them. And in the past, his vetoes have been pretty bad, vetoing the war and attempts to end the war in Yemen by Congress and stuff like that. This time, it's a good veto for bad reasons. He was mostly concerned about not having a amendment in there to repeal Section 230. And, this isn't an issue that I understand to the greatest degree, but it's a internet tech company liability protection thing. It really doesn't have anything to do with foreign policy. And so I don't think it should be included in the NDAA. And then there was also the renaming of the Confederate bases, which just close the bases. That's my solution to that problem. Another, I guess, issue that Trump had was the limiting the drawdowns in Afghanistan and Germany, potentially making it not possible. And then another provision to block any future plans to withdraw troops from South Korea. And so this is forcing U.S. troops to stay at war or, forwardly deployed in cold conflicts like Korea or the Cold War tensions with Russia and stuff like that, having U.S. troops in Germany. And then, literally forcing the president to keep troops in harm's way in Afghanistan. So for that reason, I was a fan of the veto, but obviously the first two reasons were pretty weak on Trump's part. Congress voting against overriding the veto, people did it, I think, for different reasons. A lot of them because they didn't like the NDAA, and it wasn't necessarily just to support Trump's veto. So Rand Paul, Mike Lee, John Kennedy, Jeff Markey, Cory Booker, Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, Mike Braun, Ron Wyden, Josh Haley, Ted Cruz, and Markey, and Tom Cotton, which is about the craziest variety. You have, Cory Booker, who's an establishment Democrat, Bernie Sanders, a communist, Elizabeth Warren, a progressive, Tom Cotton, a neocon, Josh Hawley, uh, right-wing populist kind of guy, and then Rand Paul libertarian kind of guy, and just about everybody in between. Maybe it represents just a little bit more the independent thinkers on Capitol Hill or something like that, who could comprehend why you would want to vote against this bill for reasons other than Trump's. But now it's going to become law, and there's another $750 billion of American taxpayer money we're just throwing away. Iran tells the IAEA it plans to enrich uranium up to 20% at its Fordo site. This is a part of what happened because the U.S. decided under Trump in 2018 to get out of the JCPOA, the Iran nuclear deal, and impose sanctions on Iran and cripple the Iranian economy, and continue to ramp up those sanctions even in the midst of the COVID pandemic that has hit Iran. And then on top of all that, also carried out assassinations, and is believed to have greenlighted the assassination of an Iranian nuclear scientist within Iran. And then, of course, obviously a year ago, killed the Iranian general Qasem Soleimani at Baghdad airport in Iraq. So there's a lot of reasons Iran has been looking to, I think, show the U.S. that it can kind of stick a finger in its eye and doesn't have to comply with everything the U.S. demands. And so this is the current move from Iran. It's not moving all that close to the amount needed for a nuclear weapon, which I think is like 90 to 95% purity. This is, I believe, medical grade, and what they tend to use to make cancer medicines and stuff like that. I'm sure the U.S. and the Hawks here will present it as a threat, and oh man, look how close Iran is to making a nuclear bomb. That isn't the course that Iran seems to want to pursue. They seem to want to return to the JCPOA and have U.S. sanctions lifted against them. However, if they're going to be subject to a blockade, and then also actions against their scientists and generals, I think they're going to respond in different ways, and this is one of them. The last story I have here is about the French mission in Mali, where they're trying to take a side in that civil war. And in the past week, they've now lost 5 soldiers, 3 a week ago. And that attack was recently claimed by the Al-Qaeda affiliate in Mali. And then 2 more French soldiers died on Saturday, and a 3rd was injured when their vehicle was hit by an IED. As far as I know, nobody has claimed credit for that second attack. So that is that's the situation there. I think this is just important to talk about because it doesn't seem to be going particularly well for France and Mali. They've lost a few dozen soldiers in the past couple of years in that country. I don't think any real wins to show for it. The overall jihadist presence in Western Africa continues to increase and ramp up. And this is something that I worry an Biden administration is going to be more receptive to, the idea that we could go into West Africa, kill the right people with our soldiers, and bring peace to the region. When we've kind of seen what has happened with France here, where their soldiers end up dead, and attacks seem to be picking up in pace. And why put U.S. troops in the line there? And also, if you look at some of the recent stories out of Africa, I think just 100 people in this past week died in 2 attacks on villages in Niger. And then you have attacks all over the place: Burkina Faso, Chad, Cameroon, Nigeria, Libya. All these areas are infested with jihadists, in part because of the Obama war in 2011 against Gaddafi, but also these anti-terror operations that have just spread terror since. All right, that's where I'm wrapping up the show for today. Again, I was really surprised and excited this morning with the announcement that Assange won't be extradited. I don't think that fight is over. I'm not sure where Assange would even go once all of this is said and done, and if there's a country where he could safely continue his job, bringing us important documents through WikiLeaks, and not be subject to U.S. extradition, or be able to also publish, maybe you could go then to like Cuba or Venezuela, Russia, China. Then you have kind of the stigma going to one of those countries. But on top of that, Assange is willing to publish documents about all those countries as well, and I'm sure if he gets a cache of documents about things that the Chinese government's doing that is up to no good, then he'll publish those as well. But that's probably pretty dangerous if you're living in Beijing or something like that. So I have no idea what Assange is going to do after this, but hopefully, at least for the time to come, we'll find out on Wednesday that he could go somewhere and be a somewhat free man for at least a few days, and seems to be something that the guy definitely deserves. All right. Share the show. Donate to the show. You could do that at patreon.com/conflicts of interest. I still have the foreign policy focus up one as well. Probably need to switch that to a different one, set up subscribe star and other stuff. Subscribe on the YouTube channel, and I will be back with another show on Wednesday.